First of all, I would like to thank Toyo University for your invitation to contribute to this international PPP forum. It's really a pleasure. I would like also to specify that I'm talking in my personal capacity. I am Frédéric Bobet. I am working at the French Ministry of Finance at the Treasury. I'm part of the FININFRA, the PPP unit, Mission d'appui au financement des infrastructures. I have been working for several years on PPP project in France, the project structuration, project financing. And now I'm in charge of all international affairs on infrastructure on PPPs. So I'm in charge of several international cooperation with other governments on PPPs. And I am also representing France to international work, the multilateral activities. So I'm part of the G20 Infrastructure Working Group. I am also representing France to the G20 OECD Task Force on Long-Term Investment. I am also representing France on the UNICE Working Party on PPPs, and I'm part of the bureau. I'm also following OECD work, such as network of senior infrastructure and PPP representatives on the OECD horizontal project on sustainable infrastructure. So there have been a lot of work undertaken by the international community, which I am following or contributing to. I would like to present some key achievements of the international community on infrastructure on PPP. One point is that the challenge is not primarily that of financing, but rather having a program of infrastructure projects that are well prepared. Early preparation of projects has turned out to be a major difficulty for many countries. In that respect, multilateral development banks have worked jointly to set a system for helping countries in early preparation of projects. This is the multilateral platform SOURCE that is led and financed jointly by multilateral development banks, the World Bank and Inter-American Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, EBRD, EIB, also the African Development Bank is joining. And this SOURCE is a platform that is tailored to each country to help manage and prepare infrastructure project. This is also standardized at the international level and is built on the best practices as defined by the international community and by the MDB's experience. So now SOURCE is being disseminated across the world. There are about 50 countries that have either requested to use SOURCE as their national system or that have been engaged in some pilot project for testing SOURCE. Now, this is also an achievement with respect to some G7 and G20 orientation. There was 2017 G7 Bari principles, and also in the context of the G20, there was a Tarman report, the eminent person group work on the global financial governance, which really requires that the international system works in a more integrated way, and that multilateral development banks work together as a system. So this is already implemented, for instance, through the multilateral platform SOURCE. The G20 has underlined the systemic potential of SOURCE, of the SOURCE platform, as SOURCE, is a way to provide digitalization and also standardization for project preparation across the world, but also it facilitates data repository, which is a key consideration for facilitating private financing of infrastructure. Private investors really need benchmark on data on infrastructure performance risk on rentability for making their portfolio investment strategies on source as a data repository will be key in this context. Thus, contributing to the goal of the G20 to facilitate infrastructure becoming a full-fledged asset class for investors. Now, in the context of the COVID situation on the recovery programs, there has been very significant new demands from countries to use source, especially in the context of the infrastructure program as their recovery packages. There has been also some calls from MDBs to further accelerate the dissemination of source. A second key achievement of the international community on infrastructure and PPPs over the last few years is the idea that not only infrastructure project and PPPs project should be well prepared, but also they should not be done in the usual way as before. Now, infrastructure project in their very design should be in alignment with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. In that respect, there has been some very significant advancement, especially from the G20. In 2019, under the Japanese presidency of the G20, there was adoption by the G20 heads of state of the G20 Principles for Quality Infrastructure Investment, the QII principles. Those principles really have for purpose to align infrastructure with reaching the SDGs. So such principles focus on the attention for project preparation with efficiency, effectiveness, also environmental sustainability, also social dimension, resilience, and also good governance of projects. So this is now being developed further with a lot of work being conducted across the world on indicators for sustainable infrastructure project, on quality infrastructure project, especially by MDB. There have been works by IFC, Inter-American Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, but actually all MDBs have been doing a lot of work on how to better define such indicators for this orientation. Now, besides the G20, there is also the UNICE Working Party on PPPs that has done a lot of work on how to align PPP projects with the SDGs, with the publication of the UNICE Guiding Principles on People First PPPs, which is now, for which now there is more work for implementing such guiding principles. Third key achievement of the international community on PPPs and infrastructure, besides well-prepared project on source, quality preparation of project, is the issue of debt sustainability. We have now well identified the problem that when there is private financing of infrastructure that generate most of the time a stock of off-balance sheet and off-budget debt, sovereign debt, which means that this stock of debt is not accounted for in the official sovereign debt. So for making sure that macroeconomic debt sustainability assessment is feasible, there is first the issue of having a full-fledged fiscal transparency on the off-balance sheet debt. On that front, there has been a very significant work of the IMF, which led to the PFRAM tool, that is the PPP Fiscal Risk Assessment Model tool, that is now being disseminated jointly by the IMF and the World Bank in countries across the world. This tool, PFRAM tool, helps assess the off-balance sheet stock of debt project by project. It's a microeconomic tool. And on the two dimensions, the off-balance sheet direct debt, resulting from privately financed infrastructure, but also the contingent liabilities that result from sovereign guarantees as part of infrastructure project, and also PPP contract clauses that actually result in a commitment by government to spend money depending on some contingencies. So this consideration of the key importance of the off-balance sheet debt of PPPs is also part of the quality infrastructure investment principles of the G20 that's underlined is in principle 6.2, and that's also directly underlined in the UNICE work in the guiding principles. That's principle 10 of the guiding principles. So this is very well acknowledged now by the international community and the IMF and World Bank, and has become something of even more importance now with the COVID situation, where the stock of debt across the world has raised significantly, and sustainability becomes an even more important consideration. I would like to underline the fourth achievement of the international community on infrastructure and PPPs, which is of a more conceptual nature. There have been tremendous attention internationally on the financing of infrastructure, on private financing of infrastructure. But there is a growing awareness that actually financing is not the key issue. Financing actually results from something else, which is from the issue of bankability. And then what is at stake with bankability? I mean, what are the key considerations with regard to bankability? First of all, clearly there is the issue of well-prepared project, and hence the key importance of the multilateral platform source for having well-prepared project across the world. But also the quality and the alignment of the design of those projects with the SDGs is also of key importance. So the QII principles of the G20, but also the people first guiding principle of UNICEF are on the implementation of key importance, and that also as seen from the private sector, on including the debt sustainability consideration, on the fiscal transparency consideration. Now, bankability is at the end something specific. It's about the revenue model of the project, of the infrastructure project. So basically, there are two major revenue models for infrastructure project. In the case of PPP, there is a government pay PPP model, by which the dominant revenues that eventually pay for the infrastructure comes from the taxpayer. So taxpayer bear the main burden of the infrastructure cost. And then the second model is the end user model, the concession model, the user pay PPP model, by which then end user carries the main burden for the final cost of the infrastructure, such as in the case of highway with a toll collection, as opposed to a highway without a toll collection. Now, for those diverging revenue models, there is also some important lessons from recent experience. In France, we have, over the last years, we have become more aware of the growing difficulties for identifying strong added value of the government pay PPP model. That's really from a technical point of view, considering alternative project structuration, such as associating the private sector without asking private investor to provide financing, by which generate significant extra cost as compared to government bond emission, and do not clearly deliver as much added value as we expected in comparison with such project structuring where there is a way to transfer risk without having private financing. Now, that's our experience in France. We still have a few government by PPP, but the market is kind of drying up because of this conceptual and technical consideration. Now, more important, I would say that there is a United Kingdom Treasury experience, the long experience of the United Kingdom Treasury. The UK has launched the private finance initiative as early as the 1990s and has a long experience with PPPs. And as it turns out, over the last 2 years, the UK government decided to cancel all its PPP program and no longer use the private finance initiative by PFI or PF2 as a framework for engaging in infrastructure financing. And we find this kind of converging with the French experience. And now from this situation, I would like to draw two general conclusions. It's not clear really yet, but there could be a growing evolution, conceptual evolution, which could eventually generate a new vision on how to proceed with infrastructure and private financing of infrastructure. But it's a little early at this stage to really anticipate. Now, the second conclusion is that as far as we are concerned in France, this has reinforced our very strong pragmatic approach. As far as we are concerned, our vision at this stage is that all tools, all models are relevant, are useful, but there is a need for an even stronger project by project assessment and a better focus on the methodology to make sure that the best tool will be selected and the best revenue model will be selected and the best contract arrangement will be arranged on a case by case depending on the specification of the project. So this will be my last conclusion. And I would like to thank again Toyo University for your invitation to contribute to this international PPP forum.